You've got 4 in the waiting room. I'm just waiting for the YouTube live to do its thing. And then 5 now. I'm happy to start admitting people.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this afternoon. It'd be lovely to, if you could introduce yourselves in the chat box. It'd be great to hear who you are, where you work, what you do. And I'm curious to know if you think the officers at your union typically face much online abuse, as that's the topic we're going to be looking at today. So in the chat box, yeah, if you could just tell us who you are, you can share your pronouns if you want. Where you work and what you do, and yeah, whether or not you think that the officers at your union typically face much abuse online. Hi there, if you've just joined us, you haven't missed anything yet. Just about to do some introductions in the chat box, so feel free to add yours. So it'd be good to know who you are, where you work and what you do, and whether or not you think the officers at your union face much online abuse. I'd be really interested to hear what your thoughts are. So yeah, if you head down to the chat box to say hi, it'd be lovely to hear from some of you. My name is Jo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a freelance communications and marketing person. Definitely need to find a better title than that. But I work with different student unions on different comms and marketing projects. And before I did that, so until about 3 years ago, I worked at Sussex Students' Union, and the officers there definitely faced online abuse, sometimes for really like local Sussexy things, and other times because the Daily Mail had decided some ridiculous, incorrect thing. My personal favourite was the time they thought we'd banned the words she and her because of our inclusive language policy. Obviously we hadn't, but never let the truth get in the way of a good bit of cancel culture snowflake bashing. So that's a little bit about me. It's really nice to see some comments from you guys in the chat, from joining us from various different unions. And yeah, just having a little look. So we've got people whose officers receive abuse during elections as part of campaigning, so not even officers yet, and getting abuse. Media attention that then translates into abuse online in various places. And Jade wins a point for mentioning anonymous pages, because there's definitely an issue with these kind of confession-y pages at different universities. They are definitely a problem. And it's nice to see we've got some officers and some staff in, a good mix. And I guess if I just talk a little bit about the topic more generally and some of the research I've done, and then I'm going to put you guys to work to help me work out what unions could be doing to help reduce the impact of this. So like I said, I worked in student unions for a long time, communications manager at Sussex for a number of years, and always dealing with some drama for something. And I knew that officers got abuse, but I have to say, I really underestimated the volume and the impact of it. And I think that that's something that a lot of us who work in unions, particularly who've worked in unions for a while, or particularly people like me who were officers way back, I think we tend to look at it with kind of rose-tinted glasses and don't really understand the impact that online abuse can have. And like I say, it's the volume and the kind of strength of some of that. So I've been doing training with officers talking about handling negative comments, because I think there is definitely valid online pushback that unions get or the officers get as the kind of face of the union, but there is absolutely a point at which that becomes just abuse and harassment. And so I definitely think I had underestimated it. But in talking to officers about just some really shocking statistics or experiences that they'd had, I wanted to look into this a bit further. So a while ago, I did a piece of research asking current and former officers about their experience. And I've put some of the findings into this mural. So if you click the link in the chat box, you will head over to this virtual whiteboard that I have put some of my findings into. So if you just head over there, you shouldn't need to register or anything. You should be able to just get straight in. And what I've done is I've dumped some slides and various bits and pieces on here, but I'll talk you through them a little bit, and then you'll see I've got some space for you to add your ideas for how we could tackle this. So first of all, if we start up in the top left, and with Mural, you can zoom in using this little box at the bottom right of your screen. If you've got a trackpad or something, you can move it around so that you can see what's going. And I have the most important button, which is I can make it rain confetti, which that is definitely a perk of online meetings, because if you do that in an in-person meeting, you are a jerk. But online, it's magical. If we head over to the top left, you can see my definition that I came up with. And I should say that when I was doing this research, I was working with some other great organisations. So Glitch is a charity that aims to end online abuse. They do a lot of work around particularly the kind of gendered and racialized aspects of online abuse. And they work with some really interesting people. Definitely go have a look at what they're doing. And working with Andrew Keenan of SU Skills, who's super smart and knows loads about unions. But this is the definition I came up with, because I wanted to make it clear that this is not the same as valid feedback or constructive criticism. This is stuff that is much further than that, has much more of an impact. And like I said, I was really surprised at the sheer volume of this. So when I asked people, almost 9 out of 10 had experienced online abuse with officers. And to be honest, I'm kind of surprised knowing what I know now that number is not even higher. And the most common location that people had seen abusive content was on these anonymous Facebook pages. And perhaps unsurprisingly, women and officers of colour saw more or worse abuse in general. And it's really frequent. So for almost 1 in 3 officers, it's happening at least weekly. This is not like once a term something kicks off and it all gets a bit much. This is something that is regular, is really frequent. And it's in the form of being trolled or being bullied or being targeted with a pylon. So that's when someone says, like, you'll never guess what so-and-so's just said, like, let's all go over there and tell them what we think of them. And these include violent threats and can include threats of sexual violence as well. And this is like, there are some people who reported receiving death threats. So we are talking about some quite menacing messages. This isn't just a bit of, snarky Twitter banter. And it includes comments about their personal appearance, which is more likely for women, and abuse that refers to their gender or is kind of motivated by their gender. And 64% of people said the abuse made them feel unsafe at work. And you can see I've listed some of the impacts it had. So it's impacted people's confidence, their desire to get involved in politics in future. And if we think about women and officers of colour being targeted more often, then we can see that those are groups who are already underrepresented in kind of wider politics. So yeah, that's having a negative impact there. And it's also affecting their willingness to post to their work accounts, be open about their views, and also encouraging other students to get involved and to be an officer. So that's a kind of grim start to the session, do apologise, but I wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on the scope and the impact of this. Then underneath that, you've got some images that are on this kind of pale teal background. And so this is where I was looking at what people were saying when I was asking about support that they got from their union. And I was shocked, but maybe having spoken to officers, not surprised that so many people did not feel supported by their union when facing abuse, which I think is really sad, because I know the staff I know really want to support officers. They want to empower them, they want to enable them to do amazing things. So it was really sad to see that so many officers didn't feel supported, and that nearly a third of them didn't think their concerns would be taken seriously if they told someone, which again, like, that shouldn't be the case. We should be, you know, officers should know that we're in their corner and that we would take their concerns seriously. Then I also asked officers about what support was available to them. 1 in 4 of them said they didn't think there was a process to report students sending them abuse, because there was a lot of issues with anonymous abuse or abuse from accounts where they couldn't really work out who it was. But actually, there's an awful lot of students who are more than happy to be identifiable, to put their name to the abuse that they are sending to officers. So actually, there are lots of cases where officers know exactly who that abuse is coming from, but that they didn't think that their unions had a process to report those students if they wanted to. And then I also asked officers what support was available to them, what they'd used, and what they'd find most useful. And so there's this slightly unusable, but hopefully you get the point, bar chart at the bottom. So I've sourced it with things that officers said would be most useful are at the top. So being offered free counselling, but also just simple things like, you know, spotting that someone's being targeted and just checking in, like, how are you doing? You know, I've seen it's all getting a bit much. You know, I've seen there's lots of comments, are you okay? So not everything that, you know, that we're asking for is big or complicated or expensive. So I want us to kind of bear in mind when we're looking at some solutions that there is some stuff where you're going to have to put some time, some money, some resource behind things. But there's also just some other, like, easy, free stuff that you can do. So those are some of the things that they've said would be useful. But I think it's also interesting to look at the difference between what is available to them and what they find useful or what they've used. So, for instance, lots of officers have choice over which social media accounts they use, but that hasn't been all that useful to people. Whereas they're counselling, lots of people have been, it's available to them, but they haven't used it. And so that's an interesting one to think about. Why might that be? Is it that it's not the right type of support? Is it that it's not, you know, suited to officers, you know, that they're being offered like the standard student support package, which isn't tailored, doesn't meet their needs? So that's some stuff to think about. And then what I've done on the rest of this mural page is I've taken some of the ideas that I've had about things that we could be doing for officers to support them, and started adding some ideas of what that might actually be, what those things are. And that's where I'd really love your help. So what you can do is you can add post-its. So you can double click somewhere and that will add a little yellow post-it. You can resize it, you can move it around, and then you can click to type on it. And if you want to, you can change the color or the size, you can add pictures, go for it. But yeah, I just really wanted to hear your ideas. And if there's something that doesn't fit into one of those categories, just whack it any way you like, because this is definitely the more the merrier ideas. So yeah, I'm just really interested in hearing what you think could be done, because I would like to create a list of things that unions could be doing so that we can share that with people and say, here, this is what you should be doing to help support your officers, or these are some options to consider. So you can roughly group them by these topics. So the first one is about taking online abuse seriously. So this is making sure that your officers know that this is something that you would listen to, you would take it seriously, you would take some action. You wouldn't just say, oh well, just don't look at it, because that is not advice that officers find useful. I think it's not very practical, and it's kind of minimizing the impact that it has on them. So what can we do so that officers know we will take that abuse seriously? The next one is about standing against fake news and abuse. And I think here, this is where, doing things like if an officer is, or some of your officers are being attacked, to post something out on your channels that says, we really welcome genuine feedback, but we do not accept abusive posts, or if you want to tell us something, this is how you can do it, but posting on an anonymous page is not a useful way to do things. So because officers have said that sort of support from the union, and also if you can from the university, makes them feel that this is something that's being taken seriously. So definitely this idea of standing against it, but also I think proactively managing and moderating spaces, so you won't have any control over what happens on an anonymous page or what some anonymous Twitter user decides to say. But spaces that you do manage, so union groups, union accounts, that you do have space there to decide who's saying what. And so, have things like having some clear social media guidelines that say, we love to hear from you, we love your feedback. This is the sort of behaviour we want. This won't be tolerated. That sort of stuff can be really useful. So, how can we do that? How can we combat misinformation, rumours, speculation, and how can we, really take a stand on that? Because I think for that, it's really valuable to officers that they see you've got their back, but I think it's also useful to other students to say, okay, this is the sort of behaviour that the union will or won't tolerate. So, if they see you standing against racism, that's surely only a good thing. So that's something we can think about. And then I think it's also important to consider the intersectional aspect of this. So the fact that women may experience it differently to men, that women of colour may have a different experience to other women, etc., etc. In my research, I didn't quite have the numbers to confidently say that there was like a statistically significant difference in the experience of officers with disabilities or LGBTQ plus officers, but I think certainly there was some anecdotal information, and I think from knowing about kind of how people are generally in society, probably not a stretch to say that that isn't other groups, other kind of marginalised groups will be particularly affected. And I think here, things like making sure that people that they have someone they can talk to, but that would understand it. So if you're older, white, middle class, woman, chief exec, or marketing manager or whatever is the designated go-to person, they might not understand, they might not have that lived experience that enables them to kind of understand the impact of racist abuse or homophobic abuse. So I didn't want that to get lost in there. Then we've got some information about providing training, because I think some of this is about practical things like how you can block someone or how you can filter your feed, those sorts of things, but also making sure that they feel confident in saying what they think, and kind of managing the impact of some of that abuse. So that's there. Then the other major one is about being proactive with support. I think sometimes we think, oh, well, if there's an issue, like an officer can kind of tell me and then I will swing into action, I'll be the hero, I can help them fix it. But that is, given that I think we normalise a lot of this behaviour, maybe not on purpose, but I think there is a sense of, well, you're a public figure, you're going to have some people who disagree with you. I think that the kind of more reactive model where we wait for there to be a problem, or we wait for an officer to completely crumble and then we kind of jump in. I think we should be more proactive. So offering support, monitoring things. So, you know, keeping an eye on what people are saying about officers, you know, being the ones that are looking at those anonymous pages and pulling out stuff that's useful, rather than waiting for an officer to come to us. Because I think for a lot of them, you know, if we're already saying they don't think they'll take it seriously, and a lot of that behaviour has been normalised, you know, being, well, that's what it's like to be a woman on the internet, for instance, then I think that they're going to be less likely to come forward. So the final thing that I've got is that I was thinking of having some sort of pledge against online abuse, that unions can say, you know, we stand against online abuse, and maybe some commitments of things that they are doing to help. That's something that I was thinking about as well. But I guess I'm just happy to throw it out to people. You can add your comments directly on Mural, and we can chat about it. But it's so nice. Well, it is nice to see so many people here. I wish more of you thought this would be a pointless topic, because it's kind of sad that online abuse is such a common issue. But I guess at least we're all thinking about it and trying to tackle it. But yeah, I'm happy for people to just sit and silently post-it notes. But I was wondering if anyone had anything in particular that they wanted to talk about, maybe things they've seen, things they've tried that have worked or haven't worked. I'm really curious to hear what people have found. I wonder actually if Hannah from Stats, if you're still listening, really interested to hear about your experience. I was looking in the chat and you said that you've seen kind of abuse and being the only woman on the team, and yeah, people sadly getting abuse taking part in trans rights protests. But also interested in the thing of being a mix of online and in person. I did my research back early days of COVID, so everything had gone online, obviously, and I wonder, you know, if people have seen anything that they think that things are changing now. There's more in-person stuff. So yeah, I don't know, Hannah, if you're still listening, but it would be fascinating to hear about what's happened at Stats, if you are. One thing that I definitely wanted to pick your brains about was what was this issue of anonymous Facebook pages, and how much you think that we could do to challenge them, to, you know, so on a simple level, just reporting content that's defamatory or dangerous, or, you know, kind of has this targeted hate. But I know at some institutions there, oh gosh, I can't think now who it was, someone was telling me that their university, some university people knew who the admins were of the page, and they'd have some direct dialogue. So I'm really curious to hear from anyone who's had any direct dialogue with the people running those pages, because I feel like if I was still studying now, I would 100% be writing dissertations about those, because that's a whole weird world. I don't know if anyone has anything they want to share about anonymous pages, or just a rant. You are fully welcome to use this space to just rant about them. I think there's definitely scope, and what I've seen of anonymous pages is, if you can open a dialogue with them, with the people that run them, I think there is scope to have conversations about you know, things like media law and what you can and can't say, and, you know, if they are, you know, because sometimes admins will say, oh, we're, you know, providing a valuable public service, we're helping people with their mental health, despite the impact it has on other people's mental health. Saying, okay, fair enough. Well, this is how, this is how we could work together on those things, try and build a dialogue. Interesting to see that James Warwick, the previous union, had contact with the admins, which created a spin-off, which caused a spin-off, which is interesting. James, I don't know if you feel happy to share about how that contact was initiated. It sounds really interesting.
Do you want me to come in on that?
Yeah, go for it.
So at my previous SU, which I won't name, but not at Warwick, we had a confessions page that was quite successful, quite like a lot of students frequented it. And it did get to the point where quite a lot of things were being posted about our full-time officers that not necessarily, it was affecting their mental health, wasn't necessarily true, that sort of things. It was more good fortune of the fact that the page had been around for so long, be about 3 years, that the original admins had left university. And in the process of getting new people to run the page, we became aware of it through societies.
Uh-huh.
So unfortunately, that then meant that once it became knowledge that we knew who the admins were,
yeah,
another page was created, which was far more hostile to the Students' Union.
Yeah.
However, long story short, they published the home address of one of our sabbatical officers and it became a police issue. So
always a classy move, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
People, yeah.
So that's all I could say from our experience.
But do you think I'm really curious about the people that run these accounts. I'm really interested in doing that. Did you have discussions about what they were aiming to do, what their motives were?
From the contact we had with them, it honestly started as just a purely social enterprise. I think it ballooned into trying to make change on campus, which I think is where we sort of got in touch with them and were like, yeah, we can, how about you get that through sort of like our democratic functions or our membership functions? And that was somehow quite a productive relationship.
Maybe there is hope in some cases then.
Yeah, but I believe that the majority of them are not there purely to, make things difficult for officers. They just always end up doing that.
Yeah. Well, because, I get it. Like, that's, you look at like gossip magazines, do they still exist, or is that, I've just shown my age, but like that kind of culture of, that's more interesting than like a person went to some meetings or, yeah, I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. But yeah, yes, fascinated then that you managed to speak to someone. It wasn't at a confessions page, it was very different, but we had like a meme page about Sussex that posted, bar one questionable thing, some like genuinely quite funny stuff. And I ended up employing that person, not because they ran that page, but that was quite interesting to hear from someone who was, this sort of mystery figure on campus. And I'm like, oh, it's just him.
We did, I'll give way to other people to speak in a moment, but we did have a meme page as well, where we found out quite a lot of the memes submitted, some of which were quite critical of the Students' Union, was submitted by our president. So that was an interesting work discussion of where the line is.
Absolutely. That definitely, it wasn't malicious though, which I think shows like there's space for random stuff and that's all fine, but yeah, it's the mean stuff that I think we don't need.
Maybe this is my governance head going in, but I'd be quite interested in how many university governor meetings or how many SU boards of trustees have had conversations about the reputational impact as well with these kind of confession pages, because particularly with applicants at university, when you look through social media, if these confession pages are becoming multi-institution and they're becoming really big on places like Twitter and Facebook, and I wonder how much interest universities will have in them in the next few years as well, and if they will typically, as universities tend to, come to officers and say, how are you going to fix this?
No, when that happens. No, with no resource or support or money or anything, just can you just have a word? Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great question. Because one of the other things that came up when I was looking at this is that those links with university people, but it really meant a lot to some officers when the university would post and say, you know, we just want to back this person up, that, you know, this officer does great things and they are, you know, being unfairly targeted. That really meant a lot to them, because I think often they were, you know, they felt like they'd just been, you know, discarded, or they were kind of just collateral damage and bigger things that were happening. So yeah, I think definitely interesting to think of that reputational risk. I guess it depends on, you know, sadly, I think they wouldn't be so worried, maybe this is wrong, but like worried about people posting racist comment or something. I think, you know, yeah, maybe the world is different now, but yeah, I do wonder how much on the university radars those things are, or the comments on them. But yeah, I'm just wondering if there's anything else that anyone thinks is missing from this, or, you know, like I say, that they've tried or that hasn't worked for them. Maria, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your experience. You've just written in the chat box there about, yeah, people, you know, helping you out and backing you up.
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit. Sorry, don't know if my camera's working.
Okay.
And I used to screenshot every single little piece that I got, and it definitely built up over time. And I think eventually, like, I snapped and I like posted all of them at once, and I was like, this is the stuff that everyone says about me. And it was actually really interesting because I did that towards the end of my term, and I actually got a lot of direct messages from people going like, oh my God, I didn't realize there was so many, and oh my God, like that one was actually me, and I didn't think about how you would interpret it. And I actually got a few apologies from some of the people who had said anonymous stuff to me going, oh my God, you're right, that was creepy. I was a bit drunk when I posted that, and I'm so sorry. But like those messages had like kept me up at night and really stressed me out because I had no idea who had said them. But all I wanted, like every time like I would see one, or even like my friends would like jokingly tag me in it, I just wanted the SU to deal with it. I didn't want to have to do it myself. And a lot of the time I did. And I, like, that's the number one thing at the SU, like at the SUs I'm working at, is I try to tell our marketing teams, like, if you see this stuff, please try and protect the officer. Please try and, you know, say, okay, what do you want us to do about it? What are the next steps here? And they might be completely fine with it, but they might not be, and to not just expect them to deal with it by themselves, because that was terrifying for me. And I'm sure it is for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And even just that, like you were saying there, of people tagging you in it, because there might be people who definitely want to know, they'd rather know, even though it's probably going to have a horrendous impact on them. But yeah, I mean, so I've worked on this with Sunday Blake, who's now at Wonky, but was postgraduate officer and president at Exeter Guild. And she said, you know, I had to tell my friends to not send me that stuff. I didn't want to know, I didn't want to see. So yeah, things like making those suggestions to officers. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if this is useful, but there's a really fascinating podcast, which I have some mixed feelings about, but it's called Conversations with People Who Hate Me. And there's now a book, actually, which I probably should read. But it's definitely worth a listen, because it's Dylan Marin, who was like a vlogger, and he, you know, as a person on the internet, but also as a queer person, identified as a person of colour, I'm not quite sure, got a load of flack, and he started this podcast where he would speak to people who had posted these comments to him or about him. And then I have my issue with it is whether or not it's tone policing, because it is a little bit like, let's listen to this person who said these horrendous things and feel some empathy for them. But his catchphrase is that empathy is not endorsement. But your point there about Maria, about people not really understanding the impact of what they're saying, or understanding, not understanding they are one of 20 people that posted similar things that week. It definitely reminded me of that. And in his podcast, he then goes on to facilitate conversations with other kind of pairs of people. So someone who's posted some abuse and the person it's about. There's some really interesting stuff in there. But Rose has posted an interesting question here, because in the chat, about who should be the person to deal with this. So is this something that is a marketing thing because it's social media and it's about getting responses out and kind of media law, or PR and reputational risk? Or should it be someone in kind of EDI or campaign sphere? Should it be HR because it's a kind of a people thing and well-being? Should it be a senior leader? Well, I'm curious to know. Rosa, where do you think it could be, or where is it? You're interested to hear.
This is something I'm asking this because I really just don't know.
No worries, that's allowed. Do you have any thoughts on it? Any other kind of opinions, or do you think it depends on the person, on the individual?
I'm wondering if it might be a good thing to have a couple of people in different places around the institution with an eye on. So, someone from marketing, someone who works on EDI stuff, someone who works in like officer training or development or something, all having this in their responsibilities and liaising with one another, because it does seem like it sits across a few different things.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's seen as it's just a Twitter thing. It's over there. Someone in marketing will be looking at that, or I think people don't realise that it's a safeguarding issue. That unions have, as employers, have an obligation to keep their staff, which includes in this case officers, safe. So yeah, maybe it's about the kind of like a mesh thing that everyone, it's on a bunch of people's radars from different points of view, not so that it falls between the cracks. But yeah, and certainly there Jeff's comment about things like mental health, first aid training, those are great things. But I think we should be looking at it from those different angles, from the kind of HR safety angle, from the well-being, from the kind of personal development. There's a few different things. That's all super helpful.
Yeah, you might want the person who's in charge of the institution's social media accounts to be right there, able to put things out as quickly as possible, but also they might not be the person who's best at student support and advice or mental health stuff. So
because personally, I know I'd be all over, like I'm monitoring this, but my people skills of dealing with that, I'm not the go-to for the kind of emotional support side. I'm much more practical. So also I guess maybe it's about what suits that officer, and like I was saying, it might be someone who feels more comfortable talking to someone with a similar background to them about it. So it's not necessarily about job function, it's about personality as well. So yeah, giving people options, I guess, and seeing what works for them rather than being unnecessarily rigid. But yeah, Hannah's there made a great point about being part of the counterbalance to the negative messages that officers are hearing about how they're rubbish at their job, or that every little thing is up for that's the stuff they'll remember, that's the stuff they'll listen to, which I completely understand. It's human nature. I'm not kind of blaming them at all, but by helping outweigh some of those. So yeah, reinforcing they're doing a great job, they're doing things well, that, you know, you can't please everyone all the time. You know, look at this great feedback we've had, look at, you know, these people think you're great. That sort of stuff can really, really help, which is why I say, you know, not everything has to be some complicated policy and, you know, but just reminding them that they're brilliant. I think, and, you know, I also like to remind them that everyone gets this stuff. This isn't because they have individually somehow failed to be an excellent officer. No, it's just because they're dickheads on the internet who, you know, want to go and say stuff they don't need to. That, you know, the best people in the world get this sort of abuse, sadly. So yeah, it's not a reflection on them and how they've done their role. But this has all been super helpful. My next steps are to chat to the team at Glitch, and we're looking at possibility of running some training that's specific to unions. So training for officers to kind of equip them with skills, knowledge, confidence, but also potentially for staff so that they can have some of this stuff in place. I would definitely go and have a look at Glitch's resources. Let me just find their website for you. Because they are brilliant, they do amazing things. If you're the sort of person who likes reading about things, there's definitely that Dylan Moran podcast I recommend. Like I say, I have some slightly complicated feelings about it, but in the main, I think it's really interesting. And the book that I've completely forgotten, why have I forgotten the title? Here we go. The Laura Bates book, which I'm sorry, I've only got a link to Amazon. Go buy it from someone nice. So Laura Bates has written an amazing book. So looking at the gender aspect of this, I mean, it's grim reading because it's all about violence and hatred towards women, but there's a chapter in it about online abuse in particular, which actually talks about the founder of Glitch, the charity, and kind of their experience. So it all links together. But that's another interesting read, but you have to kind of be mentally in the right place for that one. But yeah, if anyone does have any thoughts about this, any examples, or kind of just wants a hand managing any of this, this is something that I'm really interested in, and I'd love to get your input in this. So that mural will be available kind of indefinitely. It's just going to sit on the internet. So do feel free to go over and have a look anytime you like, add some more ideas, and implement this stuff in your unions. That would be amazing. I'd really love to be able to repeat that research in a year or two's time and see a difference. Because I think it's an area where it would not be hard for us to offer more support, because I think at the moment it's somewhere that generally is a bit of a missed opportunity for us. So yeah, it was really, really good to hear from so many of you, and I hope it's kind of encouraged you to take this seriously, to talk to your officers, to see what they would like, what support they need, and to kind of be there. It's a great time with so many new officers dying to just embed some of those things. So thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, I'm going to stick my email on the chat, because I always love to talk about this stuff, depressing as it is, but the making it better that is less depressing. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jo, and thank you for everybody for attending. As you all know, we've got lots of other sessions across the week, including some more sessions with Jo later in the week. You're doing comms for non-comms people, is that correct, Jo?
So a few secrets from your comms marketing colleagues, but yeah, stuff to help you out if that's not your area of work, but it's something that you're interested in communicating more effectively with students.
Wonderful. So there's that's just one example of lots of other things that we've got going on across the week. So please keep an eye on the agenda. The other thing to mention is that tickets for our SU22 Communities of Practice are still available, and by attending our events at the moment, you can also get a slightly discounted rate of 10% using a code that I'm just going to pop into the chat now. So if you do want to purchase tickets for Communities of Practice, use that code and you'll get a 10% discount off your tickets. And thank you all for attending, and we will see you all in the next sessions.
Thanks, everyone.